Week 1 of the NFL season is just about wrapped up, which means some players emerged, some players got injured, and some players just flat out stunk. Which means one thing, you need to hit the waiver wire. Whether you're 1-0 or 0-1, the Week 1 waiver wire is typically the most important wire of the season. And on today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we're going to go through the most important injury-related news of the weekend and give you our top 13 waiver wire picks with FAAB bids heading into Week 2. I'm your host, Shaun, and I am joined by my co-host, good friend, and fellow knower of ball, Aidan Holler. Aidan, it wasn't pretty, but the Bears are 1-0. How we doing?
Yeah, that was just a bizarre game all around. Like you mentioned, 1-0. Defense absolutely showed out. You know, Caleb looked like a rookie in his first game. I thought he was going to come out a bit stronger out of the gates. You know, definitely struggled with footwork, struggled with accuracy. Keenan dropped a touchdown. I think a touchdown changes his stat line quite a bit. He still only passed for, call it 100 yards, but, dropped a touchdown. There were a couple plays, here or there. The line wasn't great, but it's a win, man. That's all you can ask for. Big game next Sunday against CJ Stroud. So we'll see. We will see, but feeling good, man. How are you doing after you had yourself a little bachelor party this weekend? How are we operating?
The voice isn't at 100%, but we're doing good. I got like a good 10 hours of sleep last night. So that was much needed. So I'm feeling good. Football was great. My 49ers have not played yet. We are actually recording this here at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. We're about 2 hours away from Jets Niners Monday Night Football. So tomorrow night we're probably going to do our instant overreactions to the Week 1 of the NFL season, and we'll get to discuss a little bit between Keegan and I, a little friendly banter on how it goes. One thing that's pretty clear is it's kind of the Jets Super Bowl, and for the 49ers, like, it is what it is. So I'm excited to see how this one goes. I think it's just be a good game, and personally, I need, I think, 43 points combined from CMC and Debo to take down a good friend of ours, Diego Dallas. So I'm rooting tremendously for my team to win and also put up some points. So go Debo, go CMC. I think it'll be a fun one. So today's episode is pretty simple. If this is the first time you're rocking with us for waivers, we've got a lot of new followers over the past month or so. So our waiver format is simple. We start with the biggest injury-related news from the weekend. And then understanding that you're probably going to need to replace some of these injured players, we go through our top 12 in this week, top 13 waiver wire pickups for the week. We have FAAB bids. We have consensus ownership across all leagues, across all formats. So that's what we're rocking with today. But before we get into that, one quick thing. If YouTube suggested the Regression to the Mean podcast to you for the first time, you come across this channel, you like what you see, feel free to subscribe. We're relatively new to this. We've grown a ton over the past month, but as we look to turn this into something more, because we all work full-time jobs on top of this, we can't do that without the help of you. So if you like this, feel free to subscribe, like the video, comment, give us your feedback. We appreciate it. All right, Aidan, ready to start with injuries?
Let's get into it, man. Yeah, we got to start with the sad before we give you guys before the suggestions.
It is the least favorite part of fantasy football is the injuries. I don't think anything tops it. And man, there were some rough ones to start Week 1. And I think we have to kick things off here with none other than Puka Nacua. Sean McVay today came out and said he has a strained PCL and he is going to land on IR for 4 weeks. So initially we thought this was going to be a re-aggravation of the bursa sack injury that he had. Turns out it's a new injury on top of that. I watched Puka play and he looked good, but literally every time he caught the ball, Aiden, it looked like he was going to die. Like the man was taking so many brutal hits. It was rough. I feel so bad for Puka because the man had a all-world rookie season where literally nothing went wrong. And I feel like we're getting the exact opposite of that right now. And PCL injuries can sap athleticism in season. I think they're going the right route by giving him 4 weeks of rest, but it's tough. It's tough. If you have Puka and you drafted him with the first 2 picks in your draft and you are now going to have to figure out how to replace him for 4 weeks, especially when Cooper Kupp is out there getting a 43% target share. It looks like prime Cooper Kupp again. This one's going to sting. This one's going to sting rough.
Not good at all.
I really don't know how else to break it down to the mean team. This one is absolutely brutal. Next injury that I think is going to have a ton of impact here on fantasy, on the fantasy community in general, is Jordan Love. Looks like he has a sprained MCL. He's likely out 3 to 6 weeks. Now, because they did not opt to put him in IR, I do think the door's open for this to being a probably 3-week ordeal. But it didn't look great. And the fact that it happened at the end of the game is again, just absolutely brutal. Brutal. David Njoku looks like he has a high ankle sprain, which typically means 3 to 4 weeks. He left the stadium in a walking boot. You're going to need to replace David Njoku at least for the next month. This one came as a surprise if you were watching the end of the Dolphins game. Devon Achane got hit, kind of got up, limped off a little bit. It's giving me PTSD because a similar situation happened to him where he sprained his knee against, I think, the Giants last year, where none of the announcers talked about it, but it was like one of the final plays of the game. He left the game. He did not play on practice. He got a DNP on Monday for practice. He has a Thursday game with an ankle injury. They did not report that he left the game due to injury, which according to some Dolphins beat reporters is pretty standard for them. So they did not practice today. It was an estimation of if he would have practiced or not. It's very likely that he could have been a DNP for rest. We don't know the severity of this injury. And what's really weird, Aidan, is it's the same exact thing for Mostert. They didn't really report that he left the game due to injury. They're saying it's a chest injury, non-participant. We've got a Thursday night game. This one's fun. This one's fun, right? Two of the more oft injured guys at running back in the same backfield are banged up. I don't know. They probably play, but I don't know.
That's my guess.
Do you have a read on it?
I'm guessing they're both just non-participants due to the short week. Minor injuries, but we'll see tomorrow. Like, we're gonna have a better read tomorrow, but I'm personally not really sounding the alarms on either one of these.
One that could have been much worse was tight end Jake Ferguson for the Dallas Cowboys. They're not ruling him out for week 2 yet with a sprained MCL. My guess is that he misses at least like 2 to 3 weeks with a sprained knee. It looked like he blew out his knee though. So I'm happy that it's just a potentially 2 to 3 week thing.
That looked ugly, like with the foot getting caught underneath it. I was like, oh, this is not good.
He was in pain too. So very happy that it wasn't season ending for Jake Ferguson. He's clearly going to be the number 2 in this offense for the most part. He was putting together a pretty good game before he got hurt in terms of generating targets and kind of a weird blowout game. It was classic Cowboys. Remember the Cowboys would just blow people out every week?
Yeah. And
you didn't even really when are we going to get a normal games? The Cowboys are already back on their bullshit, but hopefully Jake Ferguson is back in the next couple of weeks. If I were a Ferguson owner, I'd be budgeting at least 3 weeks, just to be safe and cautious with the sprained MCL. This one really sucked. Kenneth Walker left the game with an oblique injury, and take a shot if you've never heard this one before, where Kenneth Walker got an oblique injury. He has had a history of sports hernia, of abdomen injuries. He told reporters after the game, "I'm good," but we shall see.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you for clearing up the air for us. All good here. Nothing to report on.
He looked so good. Oh my goodness. He looked so good. Did you get to watch him at all before he left the game?
I did. He was awesome. He was awesome.
He looked like one of the best running backs in the league. He looked amazing. So fingers crossed everything's fine there, because this is looking like a potential like RB1 type season for K9. And Charbonnet looked great when Charbonnet came in to replace him, but Charbonnet was not playing. Like K9, he got 66% of the snaps. Yeah. It was very clearly Kenneth Walker's backfield, but that's why you draft Zach Charbonnet, because of Kenneth Walker's oblique injuries. Quickly, last 3 we've got here. Jordan Addison has a right ankle sprain. KOC said there's a ton of swelling. He's not ruling out missing him this week, but from my understanding, KOC said we're not going to push it. We're going to be smart with it. My guess is that he doesn't play at least this week, maybe next week. So if you have Jordan Addison in your flex, you're probably going to have to look elsewhere. These next 2 are Bears wide receivers. We have Rome Odunze, who had to get an MRI on his knee today, and Keenan Allen, who possibly has a hamstring injury. Do you have a read on either of these injuries as a resident Bears expert?
Yeah, so for Keenan, I actually saw it was like heel related.
This was last year. He had the heel too.
But the more I read, it was like a shoe issue. Pretty much DJ also got hurt and flus today, but it said like Keenan and DJ are good to go. I have no idea what's going to end up happening with Rome, which is a little sketch. Got rolled up on blocking. Getting rolled up from behind. Ideally, comes back clean. Maybe misses a week or two with like a minor sprain. I wouldn't worry about Keenan though. I think he's going to be just fine. Absolute like target maniac last week or yesterday, even though it didn't really mount to anything. So if there's anyone to be worried about in Chicago, it's definitely Rome. As he's the only one getting an MRI, and the only one they really deem serious whatsoever.
Yeah, the coming back in and dealing with the swelling post-injury is never what you like to see.
He didn't leave the game though. Like he finished the game, which is encouraging. I don't think he tore anything. You're not playing on a torn ACL. So I think like best case is like a super minor sprain or just like some swelling or something. Yeah. So we'll see.
We'll see. He didn't look like he had a huge role anyways. I don't know. Was he getting a ton of snaps before he went out?
The offense just kind of sucked. Let me just take a look at what his.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Rome. He ran 85% of the routes, only 13% of the targets. But I mean, that's really encouraging. Yeah, that's really encouraging.
Keenan, so
okay,
it was just a bad offensive day all around.
Keep that on your radar. My guess is you're not really starting Rome Odunze yet, anyways, but you definitely want him healthy for the stretch run. So that's just something to monitor. In terms of just call outs based off these injuries, we are not going to hit on these guys, but we do want to put them on your radar because I do think it's important that you are aware of the opportunities they'll have. One is Demarcus Robinson. He was a full-time player last night, 4 receptions, 42 yards, 7 targets. Before we jumped on the show, Aidan and I decided not to highlight Demarcus Robinson or Tyler Johnson, who also played really well, 5 targets, 79 receiving yards, 65% of the snaps once Puka went down. We just really clearly think this offense is just going to be a Cooper Kupp black hole again. So these guys are worth adding and definitely are worth putting in your flex. DeMarcus and Tyler Johnson both look good, so they'll get some love. But Kupp is going to be a singular force in fantasy football this year. It's going to be crazy.
Awesome yesterday. Like that was Triple Crown Cup. That was Triple Crown. Yeah. It was, it was awesome to watch.
Outside of these two, and again, I think both of these guys are worth adding. I would put both in that kind of 5 to 10% FAAB range, maybe even less. I do think Demarcus Robinson has more of a role throughout the season with Puka out. I do think Tyler Johnson is a direct Puka replacement. So that's just something to keep an eye on here. Other call outs too. I have Jeff Wilson, and I also have Jalen Wright. If for some reason either of these guys were to miss time in terms of Achane and in terms of Mostert, I do think these are the two to pick up. I kind of like Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson was the running back that closed out the game when both of them were hurt. So I would rather have Wilson over Wright, which kind of seems like a hot take. But I think he's the guy you go pick up, and I think both will play if they sit because of a short week. So definitely something to monitor here with those two backs. And then last, I have Jalen Naylor. He is the wide receiver 3 here for the Minnesota Vikings. Only 1 target, 1 reception, 1 touchdown, shout out. But he should see a decent amount of snaps if Addison were to get hurt. And that game kind of had a weird game script after they started blowing them out. So these are all guys that should be on your radar, but guys we're not going to hit on quite yet. We think they're just better options right now on the wire. Aidan, considering all the injury fallout, which one do you think has the biggest impact for fantasy moving forward?
I'm stuck between 2. Puka, obviously, you may have drafted him in the first round. If not, you took him right there at the second round turn. So that's huge. Re-aggravated an injury that we had already kind of raised some concerns about before the season started. You're now, you're going into week 6. At the earliest is when you're getting Puka back. That's most seasons are 13 weeks before playoffs. Like you're talking about half your fantasy season without Puka Nacua. That's that is a massive blow to your fantasy squad. I don't really care how well you drafted. And then Jordan Love. I don't really understand why he's not getting put on the IR. If 3 weeks is the soonest he's potentially back, open up a roster spot and go put him on the IR. But this one's a ripple effect because it affects Jaden Reed. This affects Christian Watson. This affects Devon. This affects Josh Jacobs.
It affects everything.
Everyone
is going to try and do.
Because it's not like they have an able-bodied backup. Malik Willis, we've seen Malik Willis. It's not very pretty, And the only thing that you can really bank on is LaFleur is a great coach.
Yes,
you look at the layups that Jordan Love is hitting a lot of times. It's you'd like to think Malik Willis is hitting those too, but he couldn't even get a Hail Mary off, and he had plenty of time. It's
I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was.
Huge drop off.
They went and traded for him too, which I think is at least a bullish indicator. And they seem pretty set on him being the backup. They've already came out and said Willis will be the backup.
Correct.
So
I forget the other guy. It's
Sean Clifford.
From Penn State. So we'll see. But I'd probably say Love's a bigger issue because this affects, call it 6 people. This offense doesn't go without Jordan Love. So we'll see. I don't know. He should be on the IR personally. I don't really understand the no IR logic if 3 weeks is probably best case scenario here.
Yeah, they get him back for the Rams in week 5. Maybe he is just one of those freaks that doesn't actually. He's Mahomes will get a high ankle sprain. He doesn't miss time. Maybe he's just one of those freaks who just wants to play. Some guys are just built different when it comes to injuries. So we'll see how this goes. But I would be shocked if
it's at least a week or two.
Yeah.
I think I saw the Colts are already 4-point favorites. Vegas is telling us he's not playing this week. That line wouldn't be that way if Jordan Love was playing. So I'd say at least a week or two. But those two for sure. Those are huge, man. Those are huge names.
All right, we got to get to the man of the hour. We got to start things off with our number 1 pickup here on waivers, and that's someone that we've liked for a while now, Aidan. And it's pretty crazy to see it happen in real time, but
it's awesome.
I think by far and away the biggest pickup that you can make in week 1. And I will say that this is a little bit different than last year where you had the Kyron emergence, you had the Puka emergence, Week 1 was crazy for waiver wire. Joshua Kelly was had a huge role in week 1, right? A lot can change, but a lot of the headliners of week 1 do go on to be stars throughout the season, correct, right? So there usually are people that you need to go pick up, and they can be a huge difference maker to your team. The tight end position was an absolute swing and a miss this weekend. I mean,
oh God, dude, it was terrible.
You want to hear this stat that I have? Isaiah Likely, his fantasy points, he scored more fantasy points, which was 26.1 fantasy points in PPR, than Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and Evan Ingram combined.
Yeah, the tight end position was dark. The top 8, they all whiffed. It was brutal out there.
So Likely here runs 69% of the routes, which is less than Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews ran more routes than him, which is kind of surprising. But on those routes, he had 34% of the targets. He had a 34% target per route run. He had 50% of the team's end zone targets. He finishes with 26.1 fantasy points. I mean, that's elite. That's an elite game. Is it likely, pun intended?
There it is.
It is likely that this is probably the best game he has all year. Probably, right? Probably, but
it'd be awesome if it wasn't.
Yeah,
this was legit.
Again, do I think he ices Mark Andrews? No, because if you look at Mark Andrews' usage, it wasn't poor at all by any means. I'm pulling it up here. This is over from My Fantasy Life that gives really strong utilization stuff. When you compare it to Mark Andrews actually ran more routes than him. But if you just look at this disparity between targets, it's just insane.
Crazy.
And a lot of football people are saying that Mark Andrews was bracketed and basically double teamed all night, which opened up the game for Isaiah Likely. But I watched Mark Andrews move in this game, and I watched Isaiah Likely move in this game, and I'm not saying it's Jover. I'm not throwing out the Jover allegations, and I'm not saying that Isaiah Likely ices Mark Andrews, but it looked a little different. It looked a little
significantly different.
Looked a little different.
And this one's been on our radar all off season.
It has been.
There's been breadcrumbs. They said they want to get likely more involved. They said they're going to run plenty of 2 tight end sets. This is a guy that I've got on redraft teams.
You do. You've been 10 toes on this one. You've been 10 toes on this one.
I told Shaun that I was naked drafting a ton of Isaiah Likely at the end of best ball drafts. He was virtually free, and it was what upside? It was him versus just a bunch of dust balls as your last pick. So, oh man, you can't ignore what he did here. Yeah, dude, 34% target rate, absolutely went nuts. The dude is an insane athlete and really just a mismatch left and right. So, Mark Andrews is recovering from the injury and the car crash from just a couple weeks ago. So it's Mark Andrews is going to get better, but these guys are going to coexist. I don't think it's last year where it's how do we get this guy in the field? He's going to be on the field, and he's a damn good athlete at the tight end position. So yeah, this is by far and away the best person that's, more than likely on your waiver wire this week.
Yep, you nailed it. I am an aggressive bidder on this, and I am aggressively going to bid on Likely in my leagues. I've got a 50% total FAAB bid on Isaiah Likely. That I'm going to drop the absolute bag on Likely. I'm not 100%. He is a tight end who is running less routes than an established star, but I am going to be aggressive here because if the Ravens continue to run 2 tight end sets, so they ran 12 personnel at 53% rate, which was the highest, it would have been the highest rate in a game last season. So they're going to run 2 tight ends, and I think they need to because clearly these 2 guys are 2 of their best playmakers. So I'm aggressive, 50% bid, number 1 waiver wire priority on Isaiah Likely, currently rostered in only 18% of leagues. So he's out there. He's out there. Quick pause before we move on to our next guy. We just got the alert that CMC is not playing tonight. So Jordan Mason may be moving up the ranks here. If he, you were already going to be listening to us after the game has happened, but depending on how this game goes, Jordan Mason is someone you have. I have CMC in a league, but thankfully I have Jordan Mason, so I immediately just put him in the starting lineup. But that is brutal. That is brutal. Oh my, that's brutal. Okay. The next guy here, Aidan, is owned in a lot more leagues, but he had one of the more impressive showings of any player in week 1. Tell us why you're all in on picking up J.K. Dobbins here from the wire.
Yeah, this was one of the more pleasant surprises of week 1. I think J.K. Dobbins is just an easy guy to root for. It feels like the injuries over the last couple of years were just brutal because it's both times was just he was off to an awesome start. So what does he do? First week here in the Chargers offense, no one really knew what this offense was going to look like week 1 with him and Gus Edwards splitting time. And what does he do? He comes out and he's the number 4 running back on the week. The guy had 22.9 fantasy points and looked pretty damn awesome. 10 carries for 135 yards, had 2 really long rushes. I think one was 40, one was in the 60 range. Had a touchdown as well from about 10 yards out and caught a couple passes. So, really impressive game from J.K. Dobbins here. Just looking at the snap counts here, 58% of the snaps compared to 42%. For Gus Edwards is really encouraging. Gus Edwards actually had 1 less carry. Gus Edwards actually had 1 more carry than J.K. Dobbins, but it looked night and day different between the 2 running backs. 10 carries for 135 versus 11 carries for 26. Gus Edwards did not look good. This is the clear-cut RB1 going forward in this offense. If you watch their post-game presser too, and you watch Harbaugh just raving with excitement when he calls J.K. Dobbins' name in that locker room, this is your RB1 going forward in that room, and I'd be aggressive on him. There's not going to be many starting running backs on your waiver wire like this in an offense too that is going to run the absolute air out of the football every single week. I'm excited about this one. J.K. Dobbins is a guy that I've always loved, and it's exciting. He may not have the burst that he used to, but I think he's also still kind of getting his legs back under him too from the injury last year. This is a guy that I see, getting better as the year goes on. His conditioning improves. So, Shaun, what do you think about J.K. Dobbins and his, pretty surprising week 1 performance?
I was really impressed. I know a lot of people are poo-pooing it because he couldn't break away on that run. He hit 19 miles per hour. Some people think he's a sell high right now. I get it. JK is trying to do something that really only Klay Thompson has done, coming back from an ACL and Achilles. And He even admitted that he was out of shape on that run, and that's why he didn't score. I think overall, though, when you come into a game and you average 11 yards per carry, that's pretty awesome. Their O-line looked great. That's a good defense with the Raiders over there. And I don't think that Gus Edwards looked good. Like, I think J.K. Dobbins had a 50% success rate. I think Edwards had like a 15%.
Gus looked awful, man, behind the same exact offensive line. Like he looked dust.
Not impressed. I mean, Gus did out-touch him in terms of running back attempts, but he didn't run routes. He wasn't targeted. Like, Dobbins had a pretty good utilization score where Edwards did not. I expect Kamani Vidal to be activated when the next time they play.
Joe.
And I definitely think that he should be getting some run over Gus Edwards because Gus looked cooked. It is just one game, but and I think the Chargers have to be cautious with how much they play Dobbins. But
I agree.
Every year there's always that fringe case, that older veteran who breaks out. Raheem Mostert scored 21 rushing touchdowns last year. I think if anyone could be this year's Mostert, I think it could be J.K. Dobbins. I could be wrong on this, man, but I would blow 50% of my FAAB if Dobbins was out there. I'd have him basically at the same priority as Isaiah Likely. Running backs are hard to come for. Like, they're hard to find regardless. And he's owned in 63% of leagues, so he's probably scooped up. But if he's out there on the wire and say like a 10-man league, I think it's time I would be willing to risk it all on Dobbins. I just think this team's going to run the ball, and he's their best running back as it stands.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on JK going forward. I think Harbaugh's a really good coach too. Like, there's no way he's going to look at his game tape and be like, Gus Edwards needs more run. If anything, I think the scale only continues to tip more in JK Dobbins' favor. And like you said too, I think Vidal also gets activated. I think they start getting something like, we don't want like 80% snapper. Like, we don't want like bell cow for JK Dobbins. That's not what we need here. But like, if we can sustain like this level of usage, maybe even get closer to 65-70% of that backfield, it's to the moon with him. Like, we know what they want to do on offense.
No, I'm totally with you here. All right. Yeah. Moving on to our next guy. Not many shows are going to lead with as the third priority pickup. With oh my gosh, I've like literally watching this league we have, and I just see Jordan Mason just picked up on the background. Not many people are going to lead with AD Mitchell, a guy who scored 1 point here, as the highest priority person to pick up here as a wide receiver. But I feel really bullish with the usage that we got from AD Mitchell in his first game as a Indianapolis Colt. If you take a look here, he had a 28% target share, which was 18th best among all receivers. He had a 75% route participation, which is in line with Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, and Ladd McConkey. He would have had 150 plus yards and 2 touchdowns if A-Rich hadn't overthrown him. And I think the role is super encouraging and the talent is clearly there, and points will come. And I want shares of this offense. So I've got AD Mitchell here at 15 to 20% of FAAB. He's owned in 61% of leagues. But I'm in on Mitchell. I know he didn't have the biggest week, but how are you feeling about Mitchell heading into week 2?
Yeah, I kind of echo what you're saying here. I was watching like the game film again on like the misses with AD Mitchell, and like 3 pretty bad misses from A-Rich. Like, even if he just connects on one of them, we're looking at a significantly bigger day here. So we're going to cover a couple more wide receivers after AD Mitch, but I think like what it comes down to is like, who has the highest ceiling for, like this fantasy season? And, I think it's AD Mitchell. Alec Pierce caught a couple deep balls. Not all that worried about him. I'd be more worried about Josh Downs personally than Alec Pierce in this offense moving forward. But AD Mitchell's a special talent. The separation he had on some of those misses from A-Rich was pretty special. So yeah, you've got him around 15 to 20%. I think that's pretty fair. It's a little aggressive, but depending on what your wide receiver room looks like, this guy's going to pop next week. They're going to get on the same page. This guy's a beast.
This next guy, I wouldn't consider him a beast, but back from the dead is Brandin Cooks, giving us a very usable week 1 here as the wide receiver 2 here for the Cowboys. Tell us why you're in on Brandin Cooks here on the wire.
Yeah, I think just looking at Brandin Cooks, like you said, pretty solid week 1, was the number 19 wide receiver in PPR formats, just under 15 points, pretty steady there, 40 catches on 7 targets and 1 touchdown. He actually led the Cowboys wide receivers in snaps, Not to say he's replacing CD by any means, but like this is the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver on this team. Add in Jake Ferg being out a couple of weeks, like that was my pick to be the number 2 option in this passing attack, and is now going to get put on ice for a couple of weeks. It's just like there's a huge pie there in that Dallas passing attack. Dak didn't pass for a ton this first week, but neither did like really any quarterback in the NFL. But man, he had like a 22% target share, man. Like that's pretty elite here. We got 23 on here. No other wide receiver even really close to, like, I know Tolbert was kind of like a fantasy darling. Like maybe he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver, and I really don't see that happening. Like I just see this as like a nice steady option in your lineup. Like it's, AD Mitchell has significantly higher ceiling on a week-to-week basis. But like, I think you can expect like this type of score from, Brandin Cooks on a weekly basis. I think he kind of just pencils you in 10 points on a given week, and you're like, cool, rinse, repeat. Let's do it again next week. So, the ceilings are not quite like AD Mitchell for sure. But, what do you have on him? Like, I'd say somewhere around like 10%, 5% maybe.
I had him on the same. I had the same. Well, a little bit less. I had 10 to 15% FAAB, 31% ownership, but you're getting 22% of the targets, 23% targets per route run, 83% of the routes. Like he's clearly the 2. Tolbert had a kind of a face plant. Jalen Tolbert probably just is who he is at this point. Brandin Cooks looked good too. Like he
did look good.
That touchdown he had was impressive. Where Dak was hot, like with the free runner in his face, and that was just a sweet play from Dak. But Cooks looked good. Cooks is a great pickup this week, especially if you have like a Deontay Johnson or like JSN and you're a little nervous about like that situation. Cooks is like a guy you could go pick up and feel solid about as like a flex option moving forward in like 2 flex leagues.
Yeah.
All right, next one here. This one's a little more fun than Brandin Cooks.
This one is definitely more fun here. This is our guy, Rasheed Shaheed. Really nice week 1 from him. I think, again, this is another guy that had a ton of buzz this year after a really strong rookie season. Was the number 11 wide receiver in PBR formats, 18.3 points, caught 3 of his 5 targets for 73 yards and a touchdown. So again, like kind of exactly what we're kind of expecting from Shaheed on a week-to-week basis. He's the clear-cut wide receiver 2 in this offense. 68% of the wide receiver snaps, and was tied with Kamara for the highest target percentage on this team in week 1. Sorry, you got this. Oh, okay. Kamara's not there. And tied with Kamara in terms of target share on this team at about 20%. So love to see him get a bit more involved in some of the short to intermediate routes in the offense there. But in my opinion, like this is the guy that has the best chemistry with Derek Carr in this offense.
It's crazy.
It's keep crazy. Waiting on the Chris Olave thing to work out with Derek Carr, and it's like him and Shaheed. I don't know what like the deep ball is really nice with him. Ideally he gets like more involved in the middle, like I was saying, but it's like his role is exactly kind of what we thought it was. I think like these deep balls are super repeatable. Carr actually does have a really good deep ball. It's just steady. Like I don't know. Like Olave is going to be better. Like he's not going to post these type of duds. He's going to have big weeks. But I think like Shaheed is the number 2 passing option in that wide receiver room, and looked good week 1 again.
Yeah, he did. 26% targets per route run, 22% target share, 73% of the routes. Over 70% is huge for him because he's been like a part-time player. Totally. 20 yard ADOT because he's just a maniac. But man, he's getting targets on play action. He's getting targets in the end zone. 47% of their air yards were to him. Like it's just a classic Shaheed game with more volume. He's like kind of a locked in flex. Like I think Shaheed so might be in like top 28 weekly consideration. Like he's if he's out there on the wire, you got to go pick up Shaheed. This guy's electric. I've got him at 10 to 15% FAAB. I don't want to get too excited because he is Mr. King of the catching the long touchdown, but these underlying stats are fantastic. He's finally like a full-time player. And this offense, again, they were playing the Panthers, so I will be careful here, but they look like the most dramatically different offense in football year over year. It was insanely different. It was kind of crazy.
Like dialing up that, like it just looked different. Like it looked dynamic. Like the looks were so much different. So yeah, to your point, it's like don't go all in, especially being tied to Derek Carr. Like that's, probably like the last thing you want to do. But I think, somewhere in the 10% range is super appropriate for this guy, given that he's probably not on your wire anyways.
Yeah, I might bump him up. If he's out there, I might be a 20% guy.
Yeah.
I might bump him up. These numbers are really solid on the back
They're
end
awesome,
here.
dude. They're awesome.
I'll be quick with this one. This isn't going to feed anyone's families here, but this is the last receiver we'll touch on. But that's Wan'Dale Robinson. I would not get too excited. Like 0 to 3% of your FAAB. He's rostered in 8% of leagues. But the utilization's crazy. I've been showing a lot of the utilization here on the Fantasy Life tool from a team perspective. But Wan'Dale Robinson here had the 15th best utilization of any receiver in week 1. He had 74% of the routes, 30% targets per route run, 31% target share. He had his customary 5.38 OT and only 32% of the air yards. But he's like locked and loaded as their wide receiver 2 here. He's basically
Neighbors for sure.
Yeah, it's just going to be him and Neighbors. People call him Scam Dale because he's just a PPR scam, but that's a guy you can just have in the. You could just have him in the flex. You can just have him in the flex. He's going to be fine. But don't get too crazy here. 0 to 3% of your FAAB, but deeper leagues, I think Wan'Dale is a great pickup. I would definitely have him at the bottom of the priority list, but if you're debating him or Demarcus Robinson, I don't know. I kind of think I'd want Wan'Dale more, even though they're in a worse offense. I do think that he's the type of receiver, because he has such a low ADOT, that Daniel Jones is actually capable of getting the ball to. He's just somebody that'd probably go pick up.
Yep, that's fair. Let's hit on one last receiver.
We got one more. That's right.
We're not leaving the show without talking about the Dortch chamber real fast. I think the Dortch chamber is absolutely worth being on your radar this year and really just being rostered in general. I think we kind of went back and forth as a team between Dortch versus Wilson. And honestly, they both had good games. Dortch was the wide receiver 31 this week, just over 11 points, got 6 of his 8 targets for 47 yards. So again, probably more of a PPR merchant here, but super established role in this offense. Michael Wilson outsnapped him just slightly by about 8 snaps. But the target percentage was pretty dramatically different. Closer to 26% for Dortch versus, about 10 Michael Wilson here. It's significantly different. I think, Kyler trusts Dortch quite a bit. It's a very safe, wide receiver 3 slot guy in that offense. MHJ is going to be a lot better going forward. And I think Michael Wilson is good too. But in my opinion, if you're debating Michael Wilson or Dortch, it's Dortch for me. I think, he has a much safer weekly floor. And especially in PPR formats, I think again, kind of going back to Brandin Cooks, I think he's, pretty safe to, be around that 10-point mark every single week. So I like Dortch. Don't get crazy. Again, this is probably someone, 0 to 3, maybe even 5%, depending on what your rostership looks like.
Yeah, I mean, 68% of the routes, ideally you want to see that over 70%. Boney's out there. He's just getting peppered. 31% targets per route run, 27% team target share. Yeah. His ADOT was super low, but that's kind of his game.
That's what we knew it was. Yeah.
Kyler looked electric to start the game and a little uncomfortable towards the end. McDermott's a good DC. But yeah, they were struggling to get the ball downfield to Marvin Harrison, and a lot of that stuff felt like the first read was kind of schemed up to Dortch or schemed up to Trey McBride over the middle, and that's kind of how it was. I think I saw Dortch get a handoff, they were using him like a weapon pretty consistently in the game. So I think Dortch is a good pickup. I would not get too crazy in terms of FAAB with Dortch. I've got it at the 0 to 3% FAAB range, very similar to Wan'Dale. I think he might be a bigger priority for me because he's in a better offense with a better quarterback than Wan'Dale. But I mean, Wan'Dale got so many looks, and Wan'Dale just gets looks when he plays. So
he's going to get them
both
again,
are good pickups.
Yeah.
You want to get to some running backs?
Let's do it, man. We've not like last, there's no Kyron out there, aside from maybe J.K. Dobbins, but we do have 2 guys we want to talk about. The first one here is Bucky Irving, and man, he did almost exactly what we wanted. In terms we talked about him in our kind of deep sleeper episode going into the year, and it was pretty much exactly what we wanted. It doesn't jump off the page in terms of scoring. He was the running back 31, had just under 10 points, but man, did he look like a significantly better rusher than Rachaad White. 9 carries, 62 yards, caught 2 more targets for another 14 yards. Man, it was like he looked like such a better rusher, 9 for 62 compared to Rachaad White's 15 for 31 on the ground. And we're not going to omit Rachaad White's receiving output because it was nice. He caught all 6 targets for 75 yards, which is what we know he's really good at. Like last year, the reason he was the running back, 3 on the year, was because he's just an absolute maniac out of the backfield. But
I don't get it. I
don't get it. And it's like
he's just a different player.
It's like, and like Todd Bowles talked about it in his post-game presser too. Like, by no means is Bucky Irving like putting Rachaad White on the bench.
No.
I think they're both very good at very different things. And he said it's like we're going to need both of these guys. But the snap counts and like the opportunities, that gap is going to widen going forward. Bucky looked so much better as a rusher, and he's going to be rewarded for it. So, this is a guy I'd absolutely go after. I'm not sure what you have him as. Like, I'm probably fine doing like in the 5, maybe even 10 range. Again, like depending on what your running back room looks like. But man, he looked awesome. Like this is a great 1-2 punch going forward in that offense.
I've got Bucky at 10 to 15% FAAB. Yeah. He is 19% ownership across leagues. I think a lot of people are down on Rachaad White and are looking for any reason to kind of dunk on White. They just really missed out on him last year, I think, and people are like, it can't happen again. I will say what was funny is Bucky, they just kind of blocked it up for him. Like,
it looked
check this out.
It looked good. Like it
looked this is from Fantasy Pros. Like Bucky had 5.3 yards before contact per attempt, and Rachaad only had 0.47. Now, I do think a little bit here, Bucky hits the hole faster for sure, but it is funny that he got better. He got it schemed up a little bit better than say Rachaad White. But yeah, I think White is definitely going to have more of a complement. I definitely do think it's very much a 1A, 1B situation. But if Rachaad White were to miss time, Bucky Irving is going to win leagues. So he has some standalone value and he has some contingency upside. So if I would not be upset if you told me I wanted to blow 20% of my FAAB on Bucky.
No,
because he looks really good. But again, Rachaad White is just such a unique player who, again, had one of the best roles in all of fantasy last week, even with Bucky Irving in the fold. So that's where I'm at with Bucky. Another fan favorite of the Regression to the Mean podcast is I don't know how, but here we are suggesting that Alexander Mattison be picked up. And what a bizarre game. Because
that's an understatement.
If you look at, I'll pull this up here. We all knew Zamir White was going to be a bad pick in fantasy. Like that's pretty clear, right? Everything screamed that White would be bad.
Dead zone box was checked.
And if you look at these numbers, and I think this is heavily game script dependent because the Raiders did go down, but Mattison had 59% of the snaps, 23% of the rush attempts, which is hilarious, but he ran 60% of the routes and he had a 19% target share and a 25% targets per route run. He had a pretty cool receiving touchdown where he made a couple guys miss. And I'm not a big Mattison guy, but he looked pretty good, all things considered. And his utilization in PPR was just far superior to Zamir White. So I think the way this plays out, if the Raiders are winning games, it's going to be Zamir White time. He still had 60% of the running back carries, but he was heavily out-snapped just because of how this game script went. And the usage clearly favors Mattison. So this guy has the pass catching role. And, he's playing on the he had the 90% of the 2-minute snaps. Like he had 100% of the late down and distance snaps. Like he's clearly the pass catcher. And I'll tell you what, Alexander Mattison has a longer history of being a decent NFL player than Zamir White. So I think you have to pick up Mattison. I wouldn't get too crazy here. I've got a 10 to 15% FAAB. He's 8% owned, but, that was an encouraging Mattison performance, especially in PPR. So I would go snag him.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw number 22 hurdle a guy, and I was like, "Who is that?" And it was like Alexander Mattison touchdown. I was like, "Fuck that! You could have fooled me because that looked nice." But I think to your point too, it's kind of all about game scripts. The Raiders looked really bad. I don't think the Chargers are all that good of a team. And it really didn't look good for that offense. And it's kind of like, do we think the Raiders are going to be in these situations, often going forward? Like, my gut kind of tells me yes. So, like, for that reason, I think Alexander Mattison is going to be on the field. And then, like, just looking at, like, the carries, too, it's not like Zamir White was, like, productive in his carries, too. Like,
no.
From a yards per carry basis, Mattison was better. It's 3.8 versus, like, 3.3. We're not, thrilled about either one, but, like, Mattison looked better as a rusher, too. So it's, like,
it's crazy.
This isn't the most exciting pick, but, like, he needs to be scooped up, especially if you kind of went like a 0 RB build. Like, this is a 0 RB one that, like, could absolutely slam dunk for you. Like, if you're sitting on a I don't know, Saquon plus something on another team, like, I don't know, maybe I'm not dying to pick up a guy like Mattison, but if you kind of went the 0 RB route, like, Mattison absolutely should be on your radar.
I'm prioritizing.
You can get a little more aggressive with him, 15 to 20 if, like, you really had to.
Yeah. Moving on to our next position group here quickly. I've got my two guys at quarterback. I've got Baker Mayfield here, and I've got Sam Darnold. So Baker Mayfield is rostered in around 32% of leagues, Sam Darnold in about 7%. Baker was the best quarterback that played football this Sunday, which is kind of crazy. 24 for 30, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 scrambles for 21 yards, 33.66 fantasy points. This offense just looks loaded with Evans, Godwin, McMillan, and White as pass catchers. Liam Cohen has it dialed, and the offensive line looked much improved. This was against a genuinely bad Washington defense, so, caveat here. We'll know more about Baker versus the Lions next week, but this could be a fringe top 12 QB rest of season. He was awesome. Like, it was kind of crazy how
he was great. On easy mode. Like, it was slicing and dicing.
There was a lot of bad quarterback play all over the league this week, and Baker was like a top 5 QB that played this week. Now, it could just be that Washington defense might just suck, but I've got 5 to 10% here on Baker of my FAAB. If you have Jordan Love out, I think Baker's a pretty solid pickup. He's got Detroit, Denver, and Philadelphia. Philadelphia just got absolutely sauteed. Denver looked fine, and Detroit, they couldn't sack Matthew Stafford when they were playing 5 backup linemen. So I think you'll be okay if you have Baker against Detroit. Another guy here is Sam Darnold. I would blow 3 to 5% of my FAAB. He's more of a 2 QB league type guy. I started the game 12 for 12, 19 to 24, 208, 2 touchdowns and a pick, 16.6 fantasy points. Weird game script. He probably could have scored more. I will say, though, he was making some incredible throws, like layered, fantastic throws. So I think Darnold needs to be picked up. He's 7% ownership across fantasy leagues. So I like both of these guys. Baker's my bigger priority. But the last one I think is the one that I think he has the most upside here with Fields. So what's your take on Fields as a former, as your your ex? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. It's just, like, my notes is like, here we go again. It just looked like the same shit. It's, like, just peppering the field with short stuff. He did get a pretty deep ball to Pickens called back. I think it was some 30, 40 yards downfield that, like, would have put him over the 200-yard mark. Looked dynamic on the ground again. It's like, it's Justin Fields again, man. Like, it's definitely the most upside, probably the most upside out of these 3. Did he play strong enough to keep the job over Russ Wilson? Like, I don't know. Probably not.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's like, he didn't turn the ball over or really take, like, the egregious sacks that he was doing, especially late in games in Chicago. Like, pretty clean game, all things considered. Yeah, 2 sacks here, 23 yards. That's not terrible. Fumbled once, didn't lose it. But it's like...
It was like the game they wanted to play, though. Like, it was super run heavy, deep play action shots to George Pickens.
Yeah, moved the ball like a couple drives. Like,
how they wanted to play.
We're gonna need some touchdowns from him. And that offense, like, they won with 6 field goals. It was not like a fun game to watch. But I don't know, man. Like, we've seen Justin Fields, at his peak in, like, fantasy, and, like, it's slate breaking. So this is like. You probably he should be rostered, I think. It's just like, I don't know what we're doing yet with him, though, because I don't even know if he's starting this week. Like, this is kind of, I'll leave it up to you how much FAAB you're spending, because I
0 to 3%.
Yeah, it's
0 to 3%. I will say, though, it did look like Arthur Smith took away some of his ceiling in this game.
It was short. It was all short stuff.
But he played well. Like, I do think that was kind of lost in the sauce, is maybe he didn't have a great fantasy game, but that looked like a hard offense to scheme against, even though it's like boomer ball. I was like, damn, if I weren't, as a Niner fan, I don't want to play that. That looked miserable. Like, just they're just going to run Najee into the ground and he can scramble.
Short stuff. Yeah, it
didn't look like and it kind of matched the tone of how I think their defense is going to. I would be shocked if they benched him. Like, that was exactly what they probably want Fields to do.
17 of 23, like, was super accurate. Like, I don't know. They might just run you into the ground this year.
They might.
And I think he gives them the best chance to do that with his legs. Russ,
especially
Russ coming back from a calf. Like, that's the last thing Russ is going to be doing with a calf injury is running. So
I just don't think Russell Wilson's good. So
I want Baker out of these three.
Oh, yeah.
I think Baker is going to be like Baker's good. Like I just feel for Browns fans that like they ran this guy out of town and they have to watch Deshaun Watson every Sunday because like, man, that offense right now with Baker would be awesome, like truly awesome. So Baker's my 1 here. Fields would be my 2. Darnold's my 3. Like I don't want Darnold unless it's a 2 QB league. Whereas I think Baker and Fields have legit starting upside in 1 QB formats.
Yep. And again, I got Baker at 5 to 10%, Darnold at 0 to 3, and Fields at 0 to 3%. Because I just know Baker Mayfield's going to start for the entire year.
100%, barring any
injuries. All right. We're going to end things here with Colby Parkinson as our last recommendation at tight end. I kind of waxed and waned between Tucker Kraft and Parkinson, but with Tucker Kraft hurt now, with Jordan Love hurt now, I just don't know if I want to jump aboard the Packers train for the short term.
Yeah,
but you got to be encouraged by Colby Parkinson's usage last night. 82% of the routes, which is awesome. You love to see a tight end clear 70, 82% is great. 12% targets per route run and a 10% target share. I don't love that, but they were scheming stuff up. Short ADOT, getting him in the flats. I just think I'd rather have him than some of the receivers out there. I know that I might get crucified for that a little bit, but I think Colby's a great pickup. I think he's going to be a top 12 tight end play this year, which just kind of seems crazy. And you can easily replace Jake Ferg or David Njoku with Parkinson and be fine with it if you miss out on the likely sweepstakes. So Parkinson's somebody I'm going to be prioritizing on waivers this week.
Yeah, it looked good, dude. It was like 90% snaps, 5 targets, 47 yards. Like, I think it's just going to be like old reliable, like it's going to be like a pretty steady play weekly. The Rams are going to continue to throw the ball a shit ton too. Like McVay doesn't run the football. I think these guys are going to keep throwing. Looked good too. Like the dude can move pretty well for a big guy. I think there's much worse options out there at the tight end position.
We've got Likely, Dobbins, A.D. Mitchell, Brandon Cooks, Rasheed Shaheed, Wan'Dale Robinson, Greg Dortch, Bucky Irving, Alexander Mattison, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Colby Parkinson. We got a lot. This was an hour. We usually don't take this long with waivers, but it's the most important week of the year. Yeah, and a lot of injuries too. So, Aidan, I appreciate you for joining. Anything you got to say to the mean team before we jump?
Good luck. Spend your FAAB wisely. You don't want to be the 100% FAAB on Josh Kelly owner. Yeah, don't. Spend your FAAB wisely. I know, like, you want to go and get a guy, like, you want to fill a hole in your roster, but it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, but at the same time, like, go get your guys that you think are going to fill, your roster for the season long. So, good luck. It's scary spending your FAAB week 1.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, no ladies. I'm be shocked if a woman was watching a week 1 waiver wire pod. Me team, we appreciate you for joining and rocking with us. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And until next time.